Welcome to Moving Forward, conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Linda Anderson, and I created this podcast as a space for real, heartfelt conversations with people who are reflecting, evolving, and boldly stepping into what's next. This podcast was born out of my own journey through seasons of loss, transition, and transformation, and my belief that healing happens when we come together to share our stories. My hope is that these conversations will inspire you to pause, reflect, and find courage as you move forward in your own life. Today's episode is deeply personal. This is our 25th conversation, and I wanted it to reflect the foundation beneath everything I've built, including this podcast. So today, I'm sitting down with my father. Ugh. My dad became a father at 18. By 22, he bought his first house, and by 23, he had 3 children. When we were 11, 9, and 6, he then had a house built that we continued to grow up in. And then he did something extraordinary. He put all 3 of his children through college, and we graduated without school loans. Growing up, I didn't fully understand the pressure that he carried. What I saw was consistency. What I saw was work. What I saw was someone who didn't complain. He just kept moving forward. As I've grown older, I've realized how much of my own work ethic, my drive, my persistence, my belief in showing up came from watching him. This conversation is about hard work, but more than that, it's about hope with intention. It's about believing in a future and then building it. Dad, I cannot thank you enough for being here. So Dad, I have a question for you. My first one is, when you found out you were going to be a father at 18, what went through your mind?
Linda, first of all, thank you so much for that introduction. It was really impressive to me. You made me have tears in my eyes.
Me too.
When I realized I was going to be a father at 18, what went through my mind mostly was how can I change my life so that this could be the beginning of supporting this child that was on the way. My assets were limited. My job opportunities were limited at that point. And I felt that there was a lot ahead of me and a lot that I had to do now to support this new life.
So at that time, so 18, but then at 23, you had 3 children. What did responsibility feel like at that age?
Just to detect some humor, it's to make sure that all 3 of you were getting together at the same time. So that was a little bit of a challenge. But basically what had happened was once the 3 arrived, the 3 of you arrived, it was just a buildup of what I had said previously, and that is the tension or pressure of supporting a family, which had now grown substantially.
What did keep you motivated though, Dad, to just keep going? I mean, 23 and 3 kids, and we'll talk a little bit about, you got the first house we moved into, but what kept
Right.
you motivated to keep going and keep working as hard as you did?
You know what, Lynn? You know what, Linda? The motivation was primarily what I just previously had said, and that is such a great responsibility that I felt that I needed to provide for this fairly substantial family which had grown in front of me. And that's what kept me motivated. It was my own self-determination.
And I know there was hope, and was hope something you felt, or was it something that you chose?
No, hope was something that was always part of my my anatomy. I always hoped things would would change, would improve, and I always hoped on different issues.
So I want the listeners to know that, a reason for doing this podcast with my dad is that the work ethics that we all learned. And so at one point, you worked two jobs. One was a full-time and one was a part-time. What did a typical day look like for you?
Yes, the two jobs is the first one was as a technician in a pharmaceutical company, and the part-time job was in a clothing store where I worked 3 nights a week and Saturday and Sunday. So a typical day during the week was rushing from one job to the other, and on the weekends it was just revolved in uh, providing on that part-time job what was instructed to me to complete.
I'm sure I could probably answer this next question that I have for you, and that is that it's your children. But my question is, what kept you from giving up? Because you were tired, you were so exhausted. What
Yeah,
kept you? Yeah.
to be perfectly frank, my exhaustion was mental more than physical,
Mm,
and uh, just a mental challenge of making sure that I was doing what I was supposed to do, and at the same time being at home to participate in my children's lives. Uh, and what drove me was not giving up to provide for that family.
mhm. And you definitely did, and you definitely were there for us every step of the way. And the first thing that happened, well, not first, there's many things that happened, but you bought your first house at 22. I want listeners to hear that. 22 years old. But what gave you the confidence to take that step, to purchase that house at 22?
You have to. I'll relate from the standpoint that when you were born, incidentally, when you were born, and I saw that little baby face in the crib, I said, "You gotta work, man. You gotta provide for her." So anyway, when you were born, I had rented an apartment in a two-story house. When your brother came along a few years later, I recognized the fact that this apartment was not sufficient enough for us to continue. Uh, and so I said, I have to find a way to get out. Simultaneously, I had succeeded in obtaining another full time position.
Mm,
So I had the finances capable to support financing a home. One of my relatives loaned me some money for a down payment uh, and to continue in that step. For me, it was purely a development of my family going forward and in a better environment and more room.
So at 22, you purchased that house, but then when we were 11 years old, so the three kids, 11, 9, and 6, you built another house. You built a house. A house was built. I remember the pictures. I remember seeing everything being built. But what did that moment mean to you?
At that point in our lives, I was fortunate enough to be able to afford something else. Uh, and as a result, I decided to build my own house. And that house had a lot in it. The house we were living in was so much smaller. I now had a house that each child had their own bedroom. There were a multitude of bathrooms in there that they were able to spread out and to be loose in their environment, a big garage with a playroom in it for them to grow into. And as an aside, I built a pool in that house
Yeah.
so that they would have some enjoyment with the house.
Mhm.
For me, that meant a really thankful, gratuitous march forward in my life with the children.
And to the listeners, many memories that will stay with me for a lifetime. So thank you for that, Dad. I said in the very beginning in the intro that you made sure that all three of your children went to college and graduated, we all did, without school loans. Why was education so important to you?
At that period of time, I recognized in the world, let's say in companies, organizations where people would look for employment, et cetera, that a continuation of education was becoming extremely important. And I recognized that if a college education would provide these children uh, with opportunities to enter chosen fields and to advance within those chosen fields. Um, and it was important for me to provide for them uh, the opportunities that were needed, as I just stated.
Mhm.
Um, Incidentally, probably another reason is I never finished college and never got my degree, so that was probably driving me in the back of my head.
But boy, did you do things with your life, and we'll continue this conversation and learn more about that. But we probably didn't see it, but what sacrifices did you make in order for us to go to college? Not only go to college, but not have school loans. I keep thinking about that because it was it was also expensive then. And I know all three of us went to private colleges too.
Yeah, I was very fortunate at that time in my life and in your life where I had progressed fairly substantially in the company that I had migrated to. So, in terms of sacrifices, I have to say, Linda, I didn't have the magnitude of sacrifices because I was able to afford to pay for those college
Mm.
educations. I say it with humor, but in those days, a college education for you would be $10,000 a year, which today is $30,000 a year.
Mm.
So life has changed somewhat over the years.
Yes.
Um, and so my sacrifices were fortunately limited, Lynn.
Well, that makes me feel better. So, Dad, you grew up in Brooklyn, and I know many stories from Brooklyn, but your father was away in the service as part of your childhood. Did that shape how you approach responsibility and fatherhood?
Yes, my father came home from the Second World War, and I was about 4 years old, and we lived in Brooklyn. My father and mother, unfortunately, didn't have a concrete way of employment or ways in which to proceed financially. As a result of that, we migrated from Brooklyn to New Jersey, back and forth. New Jersey, because my mother had relatives there, and we migrated back and forth numerous times because they were looking for some sort of life. I went. I changed my residences 7 times
Hmm.
in the time period when he came home till I entered the 8th grade in New Jersey.
Mm.
Uh, and that for me uh, is something that always laid in my head that for my children, I never wanted to have them go through that type of an experience. And I bought a house when they were young so that they would have stability and not be forced into migrating. So if I have to say something in my childhood, that's something that affected.
And it did. I mean, it came into all of us too. I mean, the foundations that the three of us have in raising our family and so on came from that move and things that you did. We took it all in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that again. But so, Dad, in the beginning, I also talked about the different companies and or the careers that you had, but you moved from sales to management at the same company. You started your own company, and after retiring, you consulted with the company you sold your business to. When did you begin to believe that you could lead? Because you did lead.
I was fortunate to have been given a trainee position in sales with a company in Manhattan, New York. As my life progressed there and I became successful in expanding the sales of a division of that company, I recognized that there was a way to expand the business and to recruit people that would help the expansion. And as a result of that, that's when I could see that I could manage an operation, not just as a salesperson selling products, but also in managing to expand that business. And that became my first entree. So I made that company grow, made that division grow, and as changes happened in that parent company, I decided to go out and establish my own company in the same category of products. And it was a better opportunity and a better time for me to change. Uh, I then I represent different companies in my own business at that time, and I elected to sell the business uh, to a company. And ironically enough, Linda, here I am, so many years later, and I'm still a consultant to that company.
You know, Dad, as I listen to your story, and I'm sure as the listeners are listening, I'm realizing something important that none of us grow alone. You worked so hard, you carried responsibility very early, and yet you kept moving forward. But sometimes we think that this strength means independence, and sometimes strength means being open to growth. So, my question to you is, who came into your life that helped you change or even think differently?
Linda, I really, to answer your question, I have to go way back in my life. Uh, when it was first apparent that I was going to have a child, my beautiful daughter, Linda,
Mhm.
the minister of my church, where I was very active, uh, was of enormous assistance to me, both emotionally, mentally, uh, in every way possible to help an 18-year-old progress. Ironically enough, he was instrumental in getting my first real job uh, because he knew someone who hired people at the company I went to. Uh, and the second, I have to say, that first company that I worked for, the return monetarily, responsibility, et cetera, was not large enough. So a person who I met in this company I was working for, who managed a department, knew a lot of people and a lot of companies. And he arranged for me to have interviews with many companies. And one is the one that ultimately hired me, which began a lead career for me.
So, do you feel that did anyone see something in you before you saw it in yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Linda. I'm just reflecting on it now as you're asking for it. But the fact that they rallied around me
Mm.
and helped me uh, mentally, I guess they had seen something uh, that was so much worth their time to help in life.
Mm. And when you think about everything you just said, I want to pull out that keyword of rallying around you. That I want you to know that do you realize that you became that person for me? You rallied around me and through many times. And I am who I am now because of you. So, on that note, I want to talk about something personal. When I was a teenager, I made decisions that weren't easy for our family, including marrying Curtis without telling you. At the time, there was resistance, especially because our family wasn't ready for that. But looking back now, I have a couple questions for you, and I'll kind of lump them together, and you can just kind of talk about it. How do you reflect on that season, and what helped you move forward from concern to acceptance?
I have to admit that when you first started being with Curtis, I felt extremely negative over it.
Mhm.
And I'm sure I added a certain negativity to our interplay with each other. And unfortunately, it was part of his heritage, his what he stood for, and his life. And I was against what you ultimately would head for. So me, as many other people, were resistance for you to get involved with him.
Mhm.
The ironic part is, after you married him, I started to have an ongoing dialogue with Curtis. And that ongoing dialogue progressed to the point where I considered him almost like a son, not a son in law, to a point where I really respected him and what he did. And what he did in terms of taking care of my daughter and taking care of my grandchildren as they came along was extremely heartwarming to me. So my whole attitude as far as Curtis was concerned really changed. And my love for this man really grew over a time period. I wish I could recommend to people that faced with that kind of situation, if you're faced with a problem dealing with someone in the beginning years, spend some time with that person himself or herself to understand them, because your attitude might change like mine did.
Mhm. And Dad, one of the things that means the most to me is how much you did come to love him and vice versa. Him right back at you. This podcast is conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. And that story and that conversation you just had with the listeners is exactly what happened in that relationship. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing that with our listeners. I'm going to talk a lot about work now because you definitely worked. When you look at your children, your grandchildren, and your great grandchildren, where do you see your work ethic reflected? And don't be humble.
I see it throughout, Linda. I feel that each one, my children, my grandchildren, all have carried on in this mental feeling that I always had of providing, of doing the best I could, and not to lay around lazily and not understand what you want to do with your life. And the ways I felt as a young person, I can see it in all of you on a regular basis. The fact of what you did with Curtis in terms of raising your children and providing them such a great life, and what they are today is so rewarding to see what they've accomplished and what they continue to do in their life as they have their own children also.
So, Dad, did you know we were watching every step of the way? We were watching you, and we
The
learned.
way, Lynn, the way things developed, I never thought about it, but I think you were.
Yes, we were. So, Dad, I have one final question for you. If you could speak to the 18-year-old version of yourself and to someone listening really right now who feels overwhelmed, what would you tell them about not quitting and continuing to move forward?
I uh, feel that I accomplished what I think I had in my head as an 18-year-old. And to talk to that 18-year-old again, I would say, thank you for pushing me in that direction and listening to what I wanted to do in my life, and to stay on that path without quitting and continuing to move forward. And I feel I would recommend the same to all the people that may be listening to this. If you feel difficulties, stay your route. You will get there. I know you will.
Oh, Dad, I hate for this to end, but I want to thank you so much for so many things, for buying the house at 22, for working two jobs when you had to, for the humility of living with family, for building a home when we were 11, 9, and 6, for putting three children through college without debt, even though you didn't have that opportunity yourself, for choosing responsibility over excuses. That's key, for choosing hope over fear, and for being willing to grow. Dad, I said it at the beginning that I wanted this episode to reflect the foundation beneath everything that I've built. And listening to you now, I realize something. Moving forward isn't about having everything figured out, it's about deciding not to quit. The truth is, though, is that the work ethic people see in me, it didn't start with me. It started with I'm trying not to cry. It started with an 18-year-old young man who believed his children could have more than he did. And then quietly, I want to pull that word out so much, quietly made it happen. And I am who I am because you chose to keep going. That's the foundation behind me, beneath me. To everyone listening, this is what moving forward looks like. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like discipline. It looks like love in action. It looks like building a future you may never personally benefit from. So until next time, thank you for being part of these conversations that matter. Let's keep moving forward. Dad, I love you.
Linda, thank you so much for allowing me on, and I love you also.